So ultimately, the strategies that I used to sort of assess where my research assistant mentee was to see if she had sort of a background, for example, in Native American studies, if even briefly. So I knew that was really important, and it's very key because even people in the field of Native American studies aren't necessarily aware of like outing programs and things like that, the stuff that I focus on in my research. And on top of that, I also wanted to see, again, if she had those sort of like critical analysis skills, and I knew that from the offset. So in those moments, I made sure to review, for example, the literature review in a way that I would actually in a classroom. So I kind of brought in my teacher experience and brought it into the mentorship just to make sure that we're both on the same page and that she felt that she had all the necessary sort of material, background, and context to be able to work on this project.
I assumed, and we started as if they had zero skills whatsoever when we began. And the way that, especially on the bench in a hard science laboratory, we're going to do everything step by step. So in my laboratory, one of the most basic techniques that we need to be able to do is putting pieces of DNA together. So with every single mentee, and my smart mentee included, the first day is like, watch me do this. The second day is we do it side by side. And the third day, you do it by yourself. And all throughout that time, there's this sort of Socratic process of like, why am I doing this? Why are you doing that? How are you doing that? It becomes much more challenging down the road. It's like now that we're doing things. We've made a graph. Now the independence is much more difficult to teach. Why did we make this graph? You know, what does this graph represent? Does this graph fit in with our hypothesis? You know, what literature is out there that can inform whether or not this graph makes sense? And again, I really like to employ a constant, you know, I'm sure my mentees are tired of a constant question. Why are we doing this? How are we doing this? Does this make sense? And at the end of the day, what I think is very important is I want their opinion. I want to ask them, what do you think? I want to try to give them some agency, and I want them to feel some type of ownership over that graph that they made.
So the way I monitored skill development throughout our sort of time in the SMART program and even after was really just through our weekly check-ins. And we worked really closely with each other. So if we went to the Oakland Public Library, we were there together having lunch and again hashing it out. And one of the things I also encouraged her to do was to create sort of field notes. So I gave her a notebook that actually had all of her notes about the archive. And we shared those together. And it was our way to make sure that we're both on the same page, but also to see how she was engaging with the material. If there were new directions we could potentially go on with coding in the future, for example. So a lot of that, I think, assessment was mostly in the moment, sort of live on the ground. And then later, for example, when it got to coding data, once she finished coding a box of data, then I assessed it. I went through and reviewed it. And so making sure that she understood where codes were supposed to go, and then also at times if something was miscoded, then also acknowledging that and defining specifically what that code would mean. So those are some of the ways that I worked in that assessment sort of throughout the project.